I'm one of the founders and the lead designer of EAA, Emre Arolat Architecture, based in Istanbul and London. And in the meantime, I'm teaching in some different universities around the world, including Europe and States. And before anything else, I like to say that I'm very happy and I'm very proud to be here, honored to be here in Paris once again with you. And I want to thank Monsieur Rambert and the Institut Français d'Architecture for letting me to be here in this precious and very, very nice environment. Today I'm planning to talk about the general tendencies of our architectural approach and its relationship with the issue of context, which is important for us. And speaking about context, we all know that in societies which are under the influence of capitalism, let's say glamorous, charming, and seductive sources are increasing rapidly. And with the help of charm globalization, the world is no longer a big planet for some of us, and the object of desire are everywhere. This is a climate of all that is solid melts into air, as Marshall Berman stated ingeniously, no matter in which geography. Sparkling icons, flashy and dashy high-rises emerge as the new symbols of the cities. On the other hand, today's time-serving relationships and new kind of communication techniques are releasing the sense of place. Distinctive qualities of locality and the nation of belonging to the place are losing their importance day by day. Off the record, most of the time the investors are using those symbols as their weapons and show off, and we as kick-ass architects, let's say, are transforming to be their agents. I think that it won't be wrong to consider this situation as an epiphany of neocolonialism. Very briefly, I can say that those intentions are gaining a general acceptance quickly by majority of the world, and a kind of neoliberal context is becoming essential day by day. Okay, now I want to give you some brief information about my personal background, and by doing that, I'm aiming to give you a first impression about Turkey's forming years. Then I'll try to forward you some clue about current sociological and political and of course urban and architectural context in Turkey. As you may know, Istanbul was the capital city of Ottoman Empire during nearly 500 years. Atatürk, who is the founder of Republic, decided to move governance center to the central part of Anatolia and assigned Ankara as the new capital in 1922. I can say that it was a quite critical decision. As you can see, this new capital looked like a big village, maybe not very big village, rather than a real city in those days. My mother and my father met each other in the Faculty of Architecture in Istanbul Technical University. And right after their marriage, they moved to Ankara in 1961 because of my father's military service. And during those days, the city was extremely small. But on the other hand, it was the kind of fortress of republicanism and one of the most distinctive symbols of Turkish westernization. Meanwhile, my parents established their first office, Arolat Architects, in Ankara, and were participating to architectural competitions in order to get a job. And they did it. After some attempts in various awards, finally they won the first prize in the competition of Zonguldak Hospital that you see here, built in 1963. I don't know if it was a coincidence or something else, but I came to this earth right at the same time. As a result of this win, they had a sense of self-confidence, and they have participated to some other competitions. They were quite successful and had the chance to see some of the projects as completed buildings. But to say the truth, life was not very easy. The state was their unique client, and to tell you the truth, not a convenient one. After 7 years of hard work, they moved to Istanbul in 1968 It was, of course, a much more vibrant, dynamic, and crowded city. On the other hand, it was the financial capital of the country. It still is indeed. In those days, social problems and political fights were standing out, and they still do exist indeed. At the same time, the amount of private sector's investments were increasing day by day rather than state hospital. This time, a variety of private investments projects were on board in Arolat's Istanbul office. In 1986, I graduated from University of Mimar Sinan in Istanbul and went to United States. And with the help of my parents, I got a job in an architectural office in Washington, D.C. After a pleasant and very profitable year in Georgetown, once again, I was in Istanbul, as you can see in the photograph, and joined to my parents. And it was the beginning of my 17 years of partnership with them. As a brief summary, I can easily say that Arolat Architects was my principal university. But within 17 years of struggle, I felt that I should graduate from there, and architectural itself was not our main field of problem, but as two different generations, we had some different imaginations about positioning the office in the market. In 2004, we founded Emre Arolat Architecture together with my partner. She's here with me now also, Gonca Paşolar. It was the forming period of Turkey's last generation progress, and we were having lots of work. We were very lucky. Most of them were quite challenging, and we were becoming more and more sensitive about context, about our profession, perceiving this sense of place and sensitivity to the distinctions of each context, each situation among our priorities. And at that point, we were 6 architects in the office, and I was thinking that it was an ideal scale for an architectural office. But just after 4 years, we were more than 100. As a pleasant incident, this time my parents closed their office and joined to our team. As our step to Europe, we opened a second office in London 2 years ago, and I should say that even with this large group, we were always very keen about conserving our amateur spirit and tried not to become a large-scale corporate office. Okay, let me tell you a bit about the current socio-political climate in Turkey. The government of Erdogan has been in power since about 14 years. And to speak honestly, they made a big move during the last decade, and the country prospered very rapidly. And in this period, construction sector was somehow the principal engine of this regime's economic policy. But on the other side, there was, and there is now also, let's say, a kind of a very uncanny situation. Especially after 2005, every single day, a brand new project came to the market. Without any master plan or any general strategy, all the vacancies of the cities has been the subject of a delusion, supported and manipulated by the government. On the other hand, I can say that creativity was not the main target at all. On top right, for example, it's a commercial from a mainstream newspaper, and it's written in Turkish, of course, "The new capital of the capital." Guess what is the name of the project? Capital. You mean the new capital of the capital is the capital. This is the creativity. This is a short fiction that I will show now, which can give you some general idea about the reflections and the perception of this atmosphere. It's a collage of television commercials from the era of the real estate delirium.
Yani her şey muhteşem olacak.
Finland, I'm happy now. If I coach a Turkish team one day, I know where my house will be.
Ayrıcalıklı bir yaşam isteyenler için tarihi fırsat. 84 ay vade ve sadece 1650 liradan başlayan taksitleri kaçırmayın.
Ben Ali Ağaoğlu. Burası İstanbul'da hayal yaşam merkezi kuruyorum.
Uzaktayken
hasret, yanımdayken hayran olan şey.
10. kattaki evin bahçesi olur mu? Yaptım, olacak. İnşaata başladık bile.
Başlayan taksileri kaçırmayın.
Ne demek
Bence
istediğimi
insan
sen daha iyi
karşısına
biliyorsun.
çıkan fırsatları çok
Yeah, I mean, this was a great boom, a fertile season of construction. But on the other hand, it's not easy to argue that architectural sensitivity was placed on the top. Instead, the real estate market was usually living in a shallow and imitated heaven. As a popular phenomenon, the simulacre replaced the sense of reality. People were mesmerized by brand new but old-looking palaces along a kitschy and pseudo-Bosphorus. This is a new mixed-use project in Istanbul, adjacent to one of the largest prisons of the country. You can see it at the right-hand side. I think you can easily perceive the good old San Marco Campanile agonizing in the middle of corrupt skyscrapers, I can say as a kind of impellent erection. Instead of Pepinos or Giovannis, this time Turkish gondoliers, Mahmut and Mustafa, are making the residents' dreams come true. Not only by the private sector, but the crazy projects, ou les grands projets, ou les trop grands projets, are also being done by the government itself. Some of you may know Istanbul. It's a metropolis with about 17 million. The northern part is relatively empty, but full of water reservoirs and forests. They serve as the elixirs of the city. But somehow, about 4 years ago, two gigantic projects fell like a bombshell. First one is the third Bosphorus Bridge, and the second is the third airport. We can easily say that they have joined their forces to destroy the ecological system. The third Bosphorus Bridge of the northern side, northern shore, was completed last summer and opened, as you can see, to public pompously by our high state officials. And the other one is the third airport terminal of Istanbul, and it's under construction for the moment. And our executives are very proud to say that when finished, with the capacity of 150 million passengers per year, it will be one of the largest in the world. Okay, at first sight, one can think and say that these projects are useful. In a way, they are indeed. Who can assert that Istanbul doesn't need a new airport? But I like to show these pictures for your kind attention. They show the destruction of the forest caused by the beltways of the bridge, and I believe that it's a sin. Unfortunately, this is not the only destruction going on in these days in Turkey, and very sadly, just in a very short time, in the blinking of an eye, let's say, the country has turned away from rest and peace. It's a very long story. It's a very dreadful and horrible game. And between you and me, I believe it's a global drama, not only valid in Turkey, but for a much wider geographies. In AAA, both in Istanbul and London, we are facing this situation just frontally, even in this atmosphere, which is quite weird. Instead of being affirmative, or let's say a kind of current capitalist system's unvariant agent, without questioning what's going on, we believe that a producing architect could take a more critical position and undertake a more opponent role. And instead of being defined only as producing well-designed or good-looking buildings, we consider our practice as an activity about raising fresh ideas every time. I can say very roughly that potentials of public benefits and sensitivity about context are the main issues of our practice, and we do not believe that architecture is an art of generating or producing new icons. I believe that this situation charges the architect with a responsibility which is much more important and definitely more complicated than being an unconcerned producer of image industry or a mediator of la société du spectacle. A book which consists of our recent architectural works was published by Rizzoli New York nearly 3 years ago. Philip Jodidio and Suha Özkan were the editors, and after some long dialogues between us about our approach, our philosophy, they named the book Context and Plurality. This is the same name of this conference as well. I'm going to talk continuously about these terms, especially about context during my presentation, but I like to convey you the source or the argument of the word plurality. So then I should refer to the term specificity, which could sound a bit conversely, but I believe it is not. I know that it could be seen as a kind of underestimation, but in a way, we can consider that, I consider that, there are two main methods or two main approaches in architectural design. One of them, I think the most popular one, is the formalistic approach. This method prioritizes the continuity of a certain architectural style as a sacred rule. I don't say that it's a bad thing, but no matter what happens, the holy signature of the architect should remain. Most of the time, the design process is a matter of adaptation. It's an adaptation of a certain style to a specific situation. But even after this adaptation, the strong language of the blessed architect should be visible under any circumstances. Usually, it's not more than a pictographic or iconic language and not necessarily related with a certain intellectual field. The other approach is more circumstantial, contextualist, site-specific, and most of the time less formalist. In fact, I feel much more close to this approach, and I believe that every project, every location, every case has its own potentials. In this sense, each project has its own specific situation. Even a very small change in the characteristics of two adjacent lands, for example, here in Bahamas, in one of our projects, could create a huge difference. So the mission of the architect should be elaborating all the conditions and specifying each problem. And since the conditions are all different, the solutions would be specific. And actually this will reveal the plurality, a kind of contextual plurality, which is nourished by the diversity of each case. We generally design in different scales, in different countries, and we face various contexts. I believe that it's a huge responsibility for an architect. Now you'll see a series of our projects very rapidly as one of our, as one page for each project. This slideshow is covering about 15 years of our production in order to give you just a very general idea about what we are doing. And then I will present you some of them in more detailed way and distinctive examples of our architectural approach and, of course, our position in the intellectual field. Since I'm not a strong believer of globalism, especially in the field of architecture, I always pay a great attention to learn, understand, and internalize distinctive characteristics of different cultures, futures patterns, specific hallmarks of the societies, physical, historical, and of course political layers of the settlements. I believe that we can learn from people, from roots, from tradition, from different cultures, dialectics, and of course new techniques sometimes, even from wind, sun, or rain. So for us, in each case, the process of design is highly educative and extremely liberatory. I think it has a great capacity of providing a limitless field of conception if you know how to use it. when we reach to the present, as you can see, the years are longer. There are much projects. Okay, in 2004, in the first day of our office of EAA, a businessman who I hardly knew called me and came to the office. And he was willing to build a new textile factory in Edirne, a city at Bulgarian border, not very far from Istanbul. Since I was aware of the fact that factories in our geography did not care about environmental issues and workers' human rights, I supposed that he was planning to construct one of those prison-like production plants. And although we were complaining about worklessness at that time, I rejected the job. He called once again after 2 weeks. This time he was more insistent and declared that he wants the best textile factory ever built. And it was like a big surprise for me, but I should accept the project this time, the project of İpek Textile Factory, in fact, still with lots of hesitation in my mind. And as one of the main design decisions, we aim to contravene the common understanding of planning system. It was like kind of turning out the destiny of the building, and we got rid of the separation between two main functions by combining production and management. And by doing this, meanwhile, we integrated green courtyards into the structure in order to get more daylight and fresh air. Moreover, we added some playgrounds and recreational areas for the workers within the landscape. And as you can see, not only the main facade, but you'll see that all surfaces from the outside are designed very carefully. And I can say that this attitude was kept in the whole building. This is the entrance of the workers. And instead of conventional dark and depressed production halls here, they are comfortably spacious and well lit. The courtyards and playgrounds are being used very intensely. These are the different courtyards in the building. They are doing this every day, believe me. And you see the cafeteria is designed with very basic materials, but still a favorable place of the workers. I can say that a continuous visible fluidity is one of the other distinctive specialty of the building, and it breaks both the physical and the social barriers between different classes. And with these architectural qualities, this factory won the Aga Khan Award in 2010. As I told you before, I have been teaching in several universities in different countries for about 20 years, and we have decided to develop a new advanced graduate program with a group of architects in Istanbul about 15 years ago. And after a couple of years of hard effort about the backbone of the program, we ended up at Bilgi University. It was a newly founded but highly assertive private school at that time, and meanwhile we learned that the institution has rented the property of Silahtara, which was the Ottoman Empire's first urban-scale power plant in the old part of Istanbul. On the Golden Horn, city's oldest industrial area, the facility went into service and supplied the city with electricity from 1911 up until 1983. And I was truly fascinated with the aura of the place at my first glance. There were tens of buildings from the first period of the plant, and the board the board of the school were looking to transform them in order to create an attractive campus, including some buildings for art exhibitions. After some consultation meetings, we were charged with the transformation project, including the general master plan, restoration or refurbishment of the existing buildings, together with some new additions. Central Istanbul has been determined as the new name of the campus. You see the location right at the end of Golden Horn, which is an inlet connected to the Bosphorus. Even a closer look, red lines are indicating the boundaries of the site. And I can say that it's a very large scale and quite complicated master plan, but since it could take a long time to talk about the whole project, I prefer to express one of the buildings, which was the Museum of Contemporary Arts. And you see the central location of that building in this site. The bluish buildings were the existing ones, and we were supposed to restore them. The oranges were the foundations, of two buildings which have been collapsed years ago. And since we were not allowed to add any new structure there, we were supposed to somehow reconstruct those buildings, to convert them to a museum. And with the help of our consultants, we made meticulous studies and reached the original blueprints together with lots of photographs of the demolished buildings. And they were quite helpful. We were able to explore all the constructional details done by some Belgian and some Russian architects. And during the layered readings of the structure, we discovered that there was a robust concrete base on the ground floors of both buildings. All the technical parts, turbines, boilers, and others, were above those bases, let's say. And we found out that those technical parts were detached from the exterior facades, which were like a light skin covering the inner nucleus or inner core. And at that point, we were supposed to identify the vertebra of our design strategy. And with the help of the found documents, it was possible and, of course, easier to reconstruct the buildings in keeping their original shapes, as they were never demolished. But we thought that it won't be the best way to choose. Instead of this, let's say, guaranteed way, we decided to work on interpretation and try to substilize a kind of abstraction. And we worked on the fundamental or primary shapes of both buildings in order to catch some clue about the transaction of the abstraction. And as a first move, we tried to execute a kind of simplification and reach up to the primal masses of two basic prismas. Of course, we should connect two masses in order to have a rational path of visiting. And this was the final elevation that we reached at the end of the process. The section showing the visual continuity and fluidity of the space. In 3D format, you can see the base part as the service levels of the museum, the core or the nucleus as the primary spaces, exhibition halls, and the rest areas, and the perforated metal facade as a translucent skin, which disappears and creates a lantern's effect during the night. And this is the final situation after the construction. The batch of buildings from the other side of the river. You see the new museum building with the others. I can say that rather than a fancy or brand new look, our aim was coming up with a kind of timeless appearance, embracing an industrial soul. But when the night comes, with the help of its translucent skin, the building transforms into a lantern, exhibiting its insides as an erotic object. Another shot from the hills. A closer look from outside. You see the grand stairs between the different levels of exhibition halls. And the contrary, look from inside to outside. It's a magic that you can see everything outside. During the visit, you have a visual contact with the neighborhood, and moving from one floor to another, you can experience the historical environment. The space in between the facade and the exhibition halls, which can contain some large art objects. And as you can see, this is quite naked and exposed building with very few materials. The entrance floor and the ramp to the mezzanine. The impartial, uncolored or natural skin could sometimes serve as a reflector or as a digital screen. This was a live audiovisual performance that was interacting with the perception of the building. Okay, here another project, but before that I should say that this animated monochrome geometrical shapes matching the real size of the aluminum modules of the facade was a great success of our friends who made this. And here another kind of matching, this time maybe less graphical but more cognitive, or let's say simply architectural, can be constructed between two projects of our office. The first one is Entrepot 5, the Museum of Painting and Sculpture of Istanbul, and the other is the Museum Hotel, is a museum hotel in Antakya or Antioch, located at two different contexts. These two has some similarities at first sight. First of all, both of them deal with existing structures. Entrepot 5 with a banal three-dimensional concrete grid, and the Museum Hotel with some huge layers of archaeological ruins from thousands of years. First one is trying to keep alive a specific aura and urban memory from 1950s, and while the other is aiming to combine primeval era with today's intellectual worries and of course touristic curiosities. Both of them are using structural frameworks together with container-like boxy models. In Entrepot, the existing concrete structure is becoming a kind of objet trouvé. On the contrary, in Museum Hotel, the steel structure is totally new. The individual galleries of the Museum of Painting and Sculpture are constructed inside on the existing grid, while the off-site prefabricated rooms of the Museum Hotel are put into their places with the help of lifting cranes. So in a way, we can argue that there are some resemblances between these two projects, but at the end of the day, they will look and behave totally different. Once again, we concentrate on the specific characteristics of each case, and that is the magic of the context. Entrepot 5 Museum of Painting and Sculpture in Istanbul is located again very near to Goldenhorn, but this time we are just at the corner of Bosphorus. And the warehouses on the site were designed by very well-known Turkish architect Sedat Eldem in 1950s. By that time, this area was being used as the main customs port of the city. Despite being in the heart of Istanbul, the complex was segregated from the city since its construction. And it served until 1990, and today is the subject of a huge transformation. And our project is about this marked building and kind of discrete from the whole master plan. I always believed that those buildings had an important place in the urban memory of Istanbul. The distinct size and the architectural character of the buildings were separating them from their surroundings. And in a way, the exposed structural grid of the facade was the most prominent element. The site plan on the left and an image from the main road on the right showing the existing buildings, the office block facing the street, and the adjacent warehouse at seaside. As I said before, the concrete structure is kept as it is, while the walls and slabs are removed in order to obtain a three-dimensional and naked structural grid, which will house the container galleries of the new museum. Now, I like to change the subject a bit for a short time and speculate about museum as a generic theme. I believe that overall tendencies and the social aspects of this phenomenon should be widely questioned in terms of positioning itself in the society. I believe that modern museum has some deep infirmities. First of all, it's not very easy to argue that it's accessible by various layers of the community. Especially in the countries like ours. Most of the time, it's somehow an implicitly sealed box containing artworks, and this art is mostly exhibited for the coterie ou pour les communautés exclusives. Although we were aware that they are not always subjects to be sold by architectural fields, socializing art and spreading it to the different layers of the society were among our main aims while discussing about this design. At least the building should be permeable, accessible, and enrich the public life around. As you can see here in this section, the ground floor is designed as the continuation of the public space, and people can visit this part without a ticket. As for the container-like art galleries, they are designed individually and arranged in clusters at upper floors. And the exhibition spaces are accessed through the big void at the left-hand side, you can see, created by removing the slabs of the former office block. That part of the building acts as the entrance and circulation core of the museum. Another shot from the same hall, the museum shop with the reception area on the left, an artist's workshop on the right. You can easily notice two layers, the new and the old, the existing concrete structure, and the additional parts with a distinctive language. Here in this diagram of the ground floor, the red area, it's Bordeaux for the moment, which is also an exhibition space, opens the whole building to its neighborhood without any barriers, while providing the connection between the street and seaside. In addition, people can interact with artists, watching them working here. A museum shop, cafeteria, digital library, and a multi-purpose hall. Also, all of them also are accessible from this space. As we go up, the galleries start to appear individually, and visitors walk around them and access each one separately. Once they enter, it's just a pure white box in the strict sense, and is all the artists liked, sterilized, properly lit, and natural in order to leave the visitor to the art. But when they go out, for some reason, to change the galleries, they experience the three-dimensional fluid spaces of the building, and of course, as well as the panoramic view of the city. Another image from the circulation route between the container galleries. And from the temporary exhibition galleries, they are located at the upper part of the building in order to provide necessary floor heights and flexibility for contemporary art. And there are also terraces on each floor, enabling visitors to enjoy the views. A restaurant with a large terrace sits at the top of the building with great views of Bosphorus and the historical peninsula. I can say that the end result will not be a flamboyant building at all. In fact, looking from the main road, people can think that nothing has been changed. And this was the effect that we intended to achieve. But when they see the containers at sites, they will begin to get some glimpses of the new situation. I believe that volumetric richness of the building will be perceivable from these angles. An overall look from the main piazza and the night shot. These are some recent pictures from the construction site. In fact, my dear friend, one of the most prominent architectural photographers, Cemal Emden, took them just for his own pleasure. Okay, as you will remember, the second project of this matching group is a museum hotel in Antioch. We exhibited this project in the last Venice Biennale and prepared a short informative movie. I made it shortened as well for this presentation, and please forgive my laziness to show that, but I believe that it will be quite informative.
Antioch. This small city near the Syrian border in southeastern Turkey has been home to many cultures and nations. From the Seleucid Empire to Rome, from the Byzantine Empire to the Seljuk dynasty, and from the Mamluk Sultanate to the Ottoman Empire, for over 2 millennia, Antioch has accumulated a vast history. Antioch has a plethora of archaeologically important sites and ruins located both around and beneath the city. In 2009, ASF, a tourism company based in Antioch, acquired this 20,000 square meter plot with the intention of building a luxurious hotel. Since most of modern-day Antioch is built upon the ancient ruins of the cultures that have left their marks for over a period of 2,000 years, zoning laws inside the city often prohibit deep foundations and basement floors. When the first drilling investigations hinted towards a massive archaeological potential, within a few months, the entire plot turned into an excavation site. After serious discoveries were made, and the archaeological discoveries turned out to be even more astounding than previously imagined, it became clear that constructing a conventional structure in this site was out of the question. Due to the sheer density of historical findings on the excavation site, Emre Arolat Architecture proposed a daring solution with the minimal impact possible, raising the hotel floors on 66 steel pillars, thus effectively separating the building from the historic remains. The rooms would then be placed on top of massive steel beams, providing segregation between public exhibition areas of the museum near the excavation floor and the private hotel areas. The roof itself, in addition to protecting the delicate artifacts from weather conditions, also mirrors the shape of the excavation site. The large crevice on the roof acts both as a natural light source and as a reference to the riverbed that has washed away some of the historical ruins in the area centuries ago. Every single pillar inside the excavation site was carefully located in a spot that contained no historic artifacts. In addition, the necessity to construct the structure with the smallest footprint feasible, combined with the unorthodox method of the pillar placement, resulted in a structure with a highly non-standard geometry and required even less standard construction techniques. The modular rooms, each carrying their own internal infrastructure over a steel framework, are designed and built as independent units. The structural shells of the 200 rooms were built in a nearby workshop over a period of 9 months. One by one, completed units were loaded onto trucks and transported to the construction site. Once on site, the 16 metric ton units were raised over the main steel structure and lowered to their final locations, eventually stacking on top of each other. Although this unique and ambitious modernist superstructure is nearing completion, the scientific conservation efforts on the archaeological site will continue long after the museum hotel is opened to the public.
Yeah, I should confess that it was one of the most challenging works that we have done until now. But as a big surprise, it's going on. It will be finished hopefully this year, against all those wars and everything going on in Syrian border. Okay, this time another scale, another subject, and totally different issues. A mixed-use project which has been completed recently. I mean, not very recently, 2.5 years ago. This is Zorlu Center. We won an international competition in 2007, which Charles Correa, Fumihiko Maki, and Martin Filler were in the jury. Very briefly, this project's aim was dealing with some contradictions, such as grandeur and modesty, public and private, institutional and domestic, social and distinguished, together with structural and topographical considerations in a very central area of Istanbul. Even if it's a privately owned land and project, public realm, or more precisely, public benefit was always on the backbone of the design. The ground is reconstructed by a topographical interpretation with a kind of shell, which is transformed into a between layer for the different functions. This shell is covered with a very carefully designed landscape. Above it, there are one hotel and 3 residential towers. Just below the shell, there are terrace residences. The shopping center, performing arts center, and the piazza are all situated on the ground floor, forming a central piazza surrounded by the retail units, restaurants, and green areas. We aim this to be a richly equipped public area which relates to people and to the city. Once again, the permeability, reachability, and accessibility of the ground level was one of the main targets of the design. There were no borders, no boundaries, no gates or otherwise limitations. And for about 3 years long, it was used this way. But unfortunately, following the latest terrorist attacks, security checkpoints are introduced at the gates a few months ago. The entrance and the foyer of the Performing Arts Center, the main hall for 2,300 spectators, and I'm happy to say that this hall is currently the most popular venue of the city for the moment. The following 2 projects are parts of our master plan for Abdullah Gül University campus in Kayseri, in an Anatolian city. It's a site of a former textile factory built in the 20s, in the 20s, yes. And after the founding of Turkish Republic in 1923, a so-called modernization movement was on board all around the country in many fields. And the Industrial Revolution was a locomotive of this movement, and Sümerbank Textile Factory was established as a part of it. Like its similars, this complex was designed by a Russian architect, this time Ivan Nikolaev, and has the typical character of constructivism. After a long process of analytical research, we decided to keep and renovate most of the existing buildings by doing some new additions, and the campus included educational and cultural buildings. This is the new Faculty of Administration building, which is completed 2 years ago. It was quite challenging for us to keep the overall spirit of the existing atmosphere and to follow the general architectural language, even for the new additions. A shot from the main entrance of the building. We kept the existing structure as much as we could and integrated with the new one. Here you see the new and the old all together. Here again, left-hand side is the old part on the ground, and right is the new addition interpreting the old-timer. Of course, the existing landscape was one of the most important determining factors of design and kept as much as possible. Some images from inside, the main circulation zone, the core. Again, the spirit of industrial buildings is kept. The common hall for the students, and once again the new and the old all together as two distinctive layers. It's a bit too much contrast, but some shots from the main library. And this is the Abdullah Gül Presidential Museum and Library building that is located in the same campus. They are the former steam and electrical plants of the factory. These are original drawings of Ivan Nikolaev. After the production stopped in 1980s, the buildings were left to their destiny. And as you can see, there was much to do. Restoration techniques in Turkey have two main approaches, generally. One is the converting the building into a brand new condition, let's say like a creamy cake, or reconstruct badly. Reconstruct badly without respecting the original. And in this case, we cared about the traces, about the layers of time, and discovered various textures. The whole building was documented in a very detailed way. Various cleaning, fulfilling, and finishing techniques were examined on site for each surface. There wasn't any holistic decision. Every single intervention was unique to its specific itself. Of course, some additional structural elements were unavoidable in order to straighten the building, as here you can see one of the most difficult works. The main roof had to be replaced. And the operation was handled with ultimate care at this altitude and under harsh weather conditions. And we are glad that after all our moves, the original character of the building was kept and all traces of time were visible. What we did may be defined as a kind of, let's say, sanitation process. The goal was to provide the required special comfort and technical equipment to make the building suitable for its new use as the first presidential museum and library of the country. These are some very recent photographs. The building has opened just 2 months ago. Yeah. An exhibition design was carried on Ralph Applebaum Associates from US, with whom we had great collaboration. can see all the old layers and new layers all together, which are visible. The landscape design consisted of rehabilitation of the existing texture, which was very important for us, and I can say a dramatic ambient lighting added to the overall value of the building. Okay, the final project that I'll present more deeply today is a mosque in Istanbul, as Monsieur Rambert said before. A couple years ago, a foundation called Sancaklar got in touch with our office about a project for a new mosque. And to speak honestly, it's as a prejudgment, I thought that they were looking for a replica of an Ottoman mosque, because in Turkey, even today, when you design a new mosque, the first thing that you have to face is the figurative burdens of classical Ottoman mosque as a weird anachronism. And I told them immediately that I'm not that kind of architect, and this first meeting was finished in a very bad way. On the other hand, I'm a big fan of Ottoman mosques and find them extremely beautiful. I adore their volumetric compositions. But today, I mean, after about half a millennium, even though the construction techniques are totally renewed, the general expectation from a new mosque is still a replica. In fact, I find this tendency quite pathetic. It's an issue that we face every day, and we are accustomed to see brand new replicas or even caricatures everywhere in the country. These two are examples from the latest part of the 20th century. The one on the left, a replica in Ankara with more reasonable proportions, maybe, but combined with a supermarket. And the one on the right, which is in Mersin, rather than minarets, you can easily think that 6 rockets will start their engines soon. Here on the left, you see the original Selimiye Mosque from 16th century, one of the masterpieces of architect Sinan in Edirne. And on the right, the brand new Ataşehir Mosque, built in 2010 in Istanbul as a clumsy replica of its original nearby residential skyscrapers. And the worst thing is, the name of this mosque is Mimar Sinan. A few days later, the head of the foundation called once again and came to the office with this picture, which was reflecting the general atmosphere, the general aura of the area. And they were willing to build a new mosque there. And to say the truth, I was extremely impressed by the lake and the untouched aura of the valley. And additionally, he said that they were ready to give me a realm of freedom for the design, and this time I should accept the project. As a routine process, we went back to the roots, to antiquity, in order to find a way of radicalization. And we saw that masjid simply means a place to prostrate and does not dictate any form. It has to be clean, that's the only condition. So in a way, anywhere on the earth can be a masjid or a praying place. And we discovered one more time that there is no formal definition for a mosque in Quran or in any other source. We have seen that they diversified under the influence of different cultures through history. So instead of searching for new and extravagant forms, we try to reach to the essence of ritual of praying. On the other hand, we realize that due to the intense pressure of current global capitalism, Islamic architecture is passing through a dangerous period. This is the danger of losing its virtue and its identity. A very good example of this, let's say, contamination is Mecca, where the Kaaba is the most sacred site in Islam, and over the years Mecca has transformed from the center of the earth to the center of tourism. Nowadays we know that it's a kind of prime real estate asset, big construction companies built luxury homes and 7-star hotels. I think with this kind of intentions, we cannot talk about modesty. Nobleness or humility, or let's say unpretentiousness, does not live here anymore. We can take the Sheikh Zayed Grand Mosque in Abu Dhabi as another example, one of the latest landmarks of Islamic architecture, which become famous for having the biggest carpet in the world, or most bombastic chandelier. It's a place for diplomatic visits, a tourist attraction, a place to see and to be seen at, a place for Facebook or Instagram. Okay, I think we can go back to the essence once again with the mark of modesty, humbleness, and humility. Sancaklar Mosque is in Büyükçekmece, located in Büyükçekmece at the outskirts of Istanbul. This is an initial photo of the site. As you can see, it has a very lovely view overlooking the lake and the wild-looking landscape. As an important decision, we put the form away in the beginning of the design process, and we aim to discard all cultural burdens which could affect the purity of our consciousness. And in this respect, we try to suppress the architectural language, of course, as much as we could, as much as possible. Actually, it's not wrong to say that this mosque is trying to tackle with the formalistic attitude of mosque architecture in Turkey. How we did it, we thought we could play with the topography a little bit. And we placed the main spaces below, and with the help of a simple slit, we got natural light into the main hall. And now, while approaching the land, we almost see nothing than a courtyard enclosed by horizontal walls and a vertical mass, which is the minaret, and it signifies the place. Now we are inside of the upper courtyard. You see the minaret and the funeral space. Another angle. From the upper courtyard to the lower level, you see the cascades following the natural slope turn into stairs. And the lower level, where you can find the entrances of the main hall, the ablution rooms, library, and a small tea corner. We used natural materials as local stone and timber together with water. And I can say that, like old Islamic Ottoman complexes, this is a place for praying as well as gathering. A kind of outer meditation space. Of course, sometimes different users could enjoy the place, no problem. Imam's house entrance on the left, and the library on the right. These are the entrances of the main hall and the ablution rooms. And now we are inside. You see the mimbar, the mihrab, and the natural light washing the Qibla wall reflects all kind of colors as the main decoration of the space. The opposite angle. The Vav letter from Mehmet Özçay, a very special calligrapher. And unlike the conventional mosques, here women can pray at the forefront. This was one of the most challenging issues of, let's say, cogenry process. But I'm very proud that they can do it. And especially on Fridays, the mosque is full, and I'm very happy about the embracement of the community. Okay, coming to the end, let me read you a quotation from the Quran, even if I'm not an expert. This is my favorite one. Don't walk upon the earth bragging. You can never cleave the earth, nor can you reach up to the mountains. Thank you very much.